What is going on, guys? It's Modded Warfare here. Welcome back to another PS5 Jailbreak news update. We have an absolute ton of updates to cover here in this video. There's been a lot happening in the scene. Things are on fire right now, so I'm going to go ahead and just dive straight into it. Starting with John Tornblum, who's thrown his hat into the ring with a Homebrew Big App Loader for the PS5. Now, this is currently work in progress, and it currently is confirmed working on 3.21 and 4.50. But it's basically a way of loading PS5 native homebrew applications, similar to what Lightning Mods and Astrelsky are working on. Now, currently, there's just a test app that flashes some different colors on the screen. That's all it's really capable of doing right now, and there are some memory corruption and some other issues that need to be worked out. Now, the way that we run homebrew on the PS5 is going to take a bit of a different approach to the way that we have to run PS4 homebrew, because right now we can use fake packages for the PS4 homebrew, but with PS5 we don't have access to fake packages. We can't, even build a PS5 fake package, let alone install and run it yet. So in order to load homebrew, it will be done differently. The way that it will most likely work is that we're going to have to copy the raw game files of the homebrew app somewhere on the hard drive of the PS5 through FTP, and then once we have that set, we'll load this Homebrew Loader payload, which will either launch the application from that specified location, or you'll use something like a donor disk payload, where essentially you'll find some other app that you have on your PS5, let's say Astro's Playroom, and then you go ahead and launch that, and then the payload, the Homebrew Loader, will swap out the file path for where it's trying to load that app and direct it to your Homebrew app instead, so it will load that instead. That's basically how we're going to have to do things until we have PS5 fake packages available, which we don't have access to right now. So things are going to be a bit different for loading PS5 native apps unless we get PS5 fake packages. So that's what we've got right there from John Tornblum. Okay, so moving on to running PS4 fake packages on the PS5, there's been quite a few developments with that. So first of all, EchoStretch managed to get most of the Homebrew Games running. So Lappy's Homebrew Games that weren't running initially, he managed to get them running. Apparently, all that was required was rebuilding the app using the latest fake package tools. I assume that these homebrew apps were probably built using the open source tools for building fake packages, so it just had to be rebuilt using the latest fake package tools, and then the homebrew apps work. Again, these are homebrew games. This is not the same for getting other homebrew apps that actually require specific offsets to do stuff, like PS4 Explorer or Itemzflow or the Homebrew Store. That's a little bit more complicated. So if you want to try these homebrew games running on your PS5, EchoStretch did put out a download link. It's a base64 string that you'll need to decode with base64 decode, and then you'll get the link that you can use to download these games and give them a try. Besides that, Lightning Mods has also been updating his homebrew, so he's managed to make some progress on getting Itemzflow working. So at the moment, he's managed to get the UI part of Itemzflow working completely, as you can see here from this video. I've also got the app myself. I'm able to get it running and it's working just fine. All of the kind of UI functions work. Obviously, the main function of the application isn't working yet. It's not detecting any applications, and it's not able to perform any operations to the applications like it can on the PS4. That's probably all going to require quite a bit of work to get that all up and running, but at least he's managed to get the UI portion done so far, and that could also apply for the Homebrew Store as well. So hopefully he'll be able to get Itemzflow and particularly the Homebrew Store working on the PS5, which would be great. He has also updated package-zone to include categories for PS5, so the Homebrew Store is getting updated for PS5 support, but it may take a little bit longer before we actually see a released version of that. So next we have some updates to running our PS4 games on the PS5. So as I've showed in my previous video, I showed you guys how to get backported games working, because that was an issue where your backported games were not installing properly on the PS5. So you had to kind of merge the game plus the backport patch together into one package and install that to get it working. So I've done an updated tutorial on that, on an easy way to get that up and running. In the meantime, we're waiting for some kind of spoofer, which would kind of eliminate the need to do this. But in the meantime, you can merge the game with the update using that tutorial, and you'll be able to get your backports installed. But one of the issues we've also been running into is that DLC content is not working. So you can technically install DLC, the applications, the package files will install, and they will appear as though they're installed on the PS5. If you go to manage content, it will show the number of DLC content that's installed for the game, but when you launch the game, the DLC content is not being loaded in-game. And this is obviously a problem, especially for some games that require an add-on in order for it to work. Like the Call of Duty games, for example, I believe Modern Warfare, for the campaign, the campaign's installed as a DLC, as an add-on package. So, you know, if we're not able to load DLC, we're not able to, you know, get the campaign for these games working. So this is some of the issues that we're running into right now. Now, CYB1K, also known as Cyber1000, of course, has managed to get DLC for these PS4 games running on the PS5 for Resident Evil 4 Remake and Assassin's Creed Mirage so far. Now, I'm not sure if he's released the Resident Evil 4 package yet. He did send me one to test, and it is working. I do have access to all of this DLC content that shows up here. So as soon as I launch the game, I've got all the DLC, including the Separate Ways DLC. That is all working. So this is all combined into the actual application package, just like how we merged the backport patch with the original game package in order to install and get the backport patch working. It's kind of the same concept for DLC, except it's not as simple as just merging the DLC files with the application package, because when you try that, the DLC still doesn't get added. So hopefully Cyber1000 will release the process for doing this, because it's unrealistic to expect him to port the DLC for every PS4 game so that we can run it on the PS5. It's just, you know, it's going to take far too long and far too much work for him to do that. So if he releases the method, at least people in the community can do it ourselves and then, you know, get more DLC working for these games, hopefully. So that is the general idea. I did ask if this could be automated in a script in some way to make it easy, but he does say that, you know, it appears to be different for every game, so it's unlikely to be automated in a script that can just do everything for you, like we can do with merging the game and the backport patch. So it will probably require a bit more manual work in order to get the DLCs working. There's also the question of how much of these issues are actually a problem with, you know, fake packages running on the PS5, and how much of it is actually something that's maybe just a bug inside the payload itself for the fake package enabler, especially the audio issues that we're running into with Resident Evil 4 Remake. Cyber1000 has confirmed that this doesn't appear to be an issue with the backport, so it appears to just be an issue with the fake package enabler, which is why we're getting these weird audio issues. So if there is an issue with the fake package enabler, hopefully Slayersgovy can fix it to help iron out some of these issues. So of course, there's still a lot of people asking how long is it going to take before it gets ported to the other firmware versions, and we got a bit of an update on that from Slayersgovy himself. So Slayersgovy went ahead and basically posted his entire method for how he found the offsets for the PS4 fake package enabler. He went ahead and gave all the information here so that other developers could follow along and perhaps port it to other firmware versions. So what he says here at the beginning is, after the recent release of PS5 case stuff with support for PS4 fake package files, there's a lot of questions about porting this to other firmwares. 4.50 and 4.51 are important in particular because users on those firmwares can't update to 4.03, but they are still vulnerable to all of the used exploits. The main problem with these ports is the bespoke execute-only memory, which prevents finding the offsets by simply examining the dumps. So in this document, I'm going to go over what offsets are important for PS5 kernel stuff and how I found them on 4.03. So he goes through all of the information here on how he found the offsets. It's a pretty complicated, involved process here. Now, in my last video, I did say that, hey, we're not sure how long it's going to take to port to the other firmwares because, you know, it might not be trivial because of execute-only memory. So we don't know if it's going to be a trivial process where there could just be a test payload that you could run that dumps the offsets, or if it's going to be more involved and more complicated. Now, based on all of this, you can see it's clearly a lot more complicated. So in his closing statement here, he says someone suggested that a test payload could be developed to find out the offsets. That wouldn't be trivial because there was a lot of manual guessing and staring at traces, trying to make sense of what's happening. Also, some of these checks involve panicking the system, so it can't be fully automated as a single payload. In my opinion, a better approach is to develop a script that would run on the PC and probe the PS5 over the network. This script wouldn't be terminated on a panic, and it could even detect the panic and ask the user for action. I think this might be the best way to reduce the manual labor involved with the search, so that everyone with a PS5 could contribute the offsets by just running the script. So that seems to be his final approach. It's not going to be as easy as just getting a dump payload that dumps the offsets like what we had for getting the offsets for the different WebKit hosts. It's going to be more complicated than that. But if he can develop this script well enough so that it basically automates everything anyway, and you can just connect this script to your PS5 if you're on 3.20 or 4.50, 4.51, and you can get the offsets that way and then send the offsets to Slayer's Govey, and he can add them to the payload to get support for your firmware. So what if he wasn't able to develop the script? Well, he is prioritizing 4.50 and 4.51, and since he's on 4.03, he could just update to 4.50 and then 4.51 to port this over to those firmwares. So I'm pretty sure it will get ported over to 4.50 and 4.51 regardless. But if he wasn't able to develop the script, then people on a 3.x firmware are definitely unlikely to see this, or it's going to be difficult for it to get ported, may take a very long time, if at all, in which case you could just update to 4.03 to access this, which is most likely what would happen in that scenario. I would still recommend staying on the firmware you're currently on, if you're on a 3.x firmware, at least until we get a bit more information about how this script is going, if he's going to be able to develop it or not. So we're going to have to wait a little bit longer to kind of determine whether or not you should update. But at the moment, I would definitely stick on whatever firmware you're currently on and not update just yet. There's also the problem of the M.2 slot not being enabled on 3.x firmwares, but it is on, I think, 4.0 and upwards. So that can be a bit of an issue, especially if we're able to run PS5 apps in the future and you're, still on 3.x, you won't be able to use the SSD slot. So still remains to be seen. At the moment, stay on whatever firmware you're on. And, if the script comes out and it can be ported to your firmware, then that's fantastic. If it doesn't come out, then, you'll have to decide at that point if it's worth updating to 4.03 or not. But yeah, anyway, stay on the firmware you're currently on for now. That's my advice, at least in the meantime. So the last topic to cover here in this video is that Illusion has updated patches to support 120 FPS for PS4 games running on the PS5. So this is a pretty big update here. Now, the games that can, reach a locked 120 FPS, presumably without having to lower the resolution, those are just by default going to run on 120 FPS now instead of 60. Whereas some of the ones that are not able to reach 120 FPS, like Bloodborne's not able to reach 120 FPS locked, neither is Gravity Rush 2. So for those games, you have the option to choose either the 60 FPS patch or the 120 FPS patch. So the way that you do that is when you're launching the game and you have libhijacker running with the patches, all you have to do to enable the 120 FPS patch on those games is hold down the X button while the game is launching. So if you launch the game while holding down the X button, it will load the 120 FPS patch. And if you don't hold down the X button, it will load the default patch, which will just be the 60 FPS patch. However, of course, games that, run fine at a locked 120 FPS, they will just run the 120 FPS patch by default. So that's what we've got right there. If you want to learn how to set up these patches, I have a full guide, a full tutorial showing you guys how to install the 60 FPS patches on the PS5. And again, the process is exactly the same for 120 Hz. Again, the only difference is for those games that can't quite reach 120 FPS locked, you have the option to, hold down the X button to load that patch when launching the game, or not hold down the X button if you just want the normal 60 FPS patch for those games. So that's the options you've got right there from Illusion. And of course, if you want to fully take advantage of these 120 FPS patches, you'll need to have a 120 Hz capable display in order to be able to, hit a refresh rate that high. But yeah, as long as you have that, you'll be able to fully take advantage of these patches. So there's also a lot of people asking, can you apply these patches to your PS4 fake package games? Now, according to Illusion, it is possible to have both running at the same time, the PS4 Fake Package Enabler by Slayer's Govey, followed by the libhijacker that runs the 60 FPS or 120 FPS patches. It is possible to have them both running, so you can apply 60 FPS or 120 FPS patches to your PS4 Fake Package games when running on the PS5. However, there is an issue right now with certain patches. So the patches that can be applied when the game is actually running, those should work, so you can get your 60 FPS, 120 FPS patches applied. However, there are some patches that need to be applied when the game is actually launching. So on the game's boot up sequence, the patch needs to be applied. Those are not working right now because apparently there's some kind of delay in the kernel. It's not able to suspend the process in time, and therefore the patch does not get applied. So those patches, unfortunately, are not going to work right now with your PS4 fake packages. But as long as the patch can be applied when the game is already running, those ones should work just fine for now. So anyway, that's essentially it for this very bloated PS5 update. Hope you guys enjoyed this video or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one.